Upon reviewing Metatron's video purporting to counter Home Team History's erudite commentary on the Afrikanity of ancient Carthage, I find myself compelled to articulate a response that not only corrects his many historical and anthropological misapprehensions, but also lays bare the depth of his intellectual impoverishment. The discourse begins with Home Team History's cogent exposition of Africa's vast ethnic and phenotypic diversity, particularly within North Africa. This diversity, far from diminishing black identity, epitomizes the inherent heterogeneity of black populations. Indeed, black peoples have long demonstrated that a spectrum of features from darker complexions to lighter, more aquiline attributes can emerge naturally without necessitating foreign admixture. Metatron's clumsy celebration of this fact, as if awarding himself a prize at a parochial contest, reveals an outdated and rudimentary understanding of phenotypic evolution. One must note that, within our cultural lexicon, the term black employed here in the Diopian sense embraces the full range of complexions exhibited by Paleo-African populations and their descendants. This linguistic and cultural continuum has, for millennia, affirmed that the presence of lighter features does not detract from one's blackness. Turning to the historical record, the Amazigh, Imahag, Moors, and so-called Berbers have, and continue to be, unequivocally black. The term Berber comes from the Beriberi people, also known as the Zagawa, and was historically used to describe a range of inner African populations from so-called Nubians to Somalis. Moreover, the Phoenicians, known also as Canaanites, and identified in biblical and Hebraic traditions as descendants of Ham, are inextricably linked to African ancestry. If one subscribes to the tenets of the Afro-Asiatic language family, which individuals like Metatron certainly do, it becomes evident that the immediate ancestors of all Semitic languages originated in Africa. Scholars such as Stephen Weitzman have argued that Semitic originated on the Afrikan continent. Metatron's invocation of Herodotus to constrict the geographical scope of the Erythraean Sea to the Persian Gulf is demonstrably flawed. Herodotus, in the opening lines of his history, alongside corroborative evidence from the periplus of the Erythraean Sea and ancient cartography, clearly designates this term as encompassing the broader northwestern Indian Ocean, including the Arabian Sea. Such evidence supports the plausibility that the Phoenicians emerged from Africa before extending their reach into Asia. The lineage of the Phoenicians, tracing back to the Natufians, the Levantine descendants of ancestral North Africans, is further corroborated by the work of scholars such as Lazaridis, who posits that the ancient Uranian culture of North Africa contributed substantially to Natufian ancestry. Craniometric analyses reveal that both the ancient Garamanti and Carthaginian populations possessed pronounced infra-Saharan traits. As Shamarka Keita has compellingly argued, despite Carthage's foundation by Phoenician elites, its prolonged presence in Africa resulted in complete Africanization. It is important to continually note that blackness has never been contained to the Hegelian Saharan, sub-Saharan false dichotomy. In reality, there was a continuum of black culture and civilization from infra-Saharan Africa to supra-Saharan Africa. According to the conventional Western model, all contemporary Western Central and Southern Africans originated in North Africa and directly descend from Saharan herders of the Kiphian and Tenarian cultures. Africanist and Greenbergian linguists have even posited that the majority of the languages of Africa originated in the Congo-Saharan or Niger-Saharan macrophylum, which was spoken in the so-called Oranian or Ibero-Maurusian culture in the terminal Pleistocene. Many of these groups migrated south after the desiccation of the Sahara after the end of the last humid period. Some of them remained. It is very easy to prove that the Sahara is not and has never been a racial dividing line on the continent. To attempt to erase the blackness of Carthage is not only historically irresponsible, but ethically untenable, particularly when one considers that titanic figures like Hannibal Barca and Septimus Severus were unequivocally black. Genetic studies further reinforce this. Uniparental markers reveal that ancient North Africans were indeed black. For example, the YDNAEM8 one is observed at frequencies as high as 90% among the Tohol Libyan Imihag, while back migration MTD and AH1 frequencies reach approximately 61% among the Libyan Fezzan Imihag. The Imihag of Egypt's Siwa Oasis exhibits MTD and A haplotypes M1, LOA1, L3I, and L4B2 that are distinctly African, and their autosomal connections with the Beja people of the Hopi River Valley trace back to a common North African ancestor some 5,000 years ago. These lineages emerged at a time when dark pigmentation was the norm across Europe, a fact underscored by a 7,000-year-old Mesolithic specimen from Labrana, Spain, whose genetic makeup attests to African pigmentation and traits indicative of lactose intolerance. What this shows is that for the bulk of African history, the migrants accepted into the continent were tropically adapted Africans who left the continent and came back. This is why some scholars view the term ancestral North African as more acceptable than basal Eurasian. In summation, Metatron's video is a lamentable exemplar of intellectual deficiency, marred by a dismissive attitude toward a rich and multifaceted historical reality. The comprehensive evidence from phenotypic diversity and cultural linguistics to archaeology, craniometry, and genetics irrefutably confirms that ancient North Africa and its illustrious civilizations were indelibly black. It is incumbent upon scholars and enthusiasts alike to reject reductive narratives and to embrace the profound black legacy of African heritage, a legacy that stands as a cornerstone of human civilization.
Rebecca Futo Kennedy. While surfing a bunch of my platforms that I'm present on as the study of antiquity in the Middle Ages, I've noticed a debate spark up again that I've seen off and on since my childhood, and that was whether or not Hannibal Barca was black. And you see arguments about the Phoenician lineages, and people are going to bring up Berbers, but it's this, I've noticed this attempt to differentiate North Africa from the rest of it. And when I say from the rest of it, it's attempting to erase the black history of North Africa away to a point as if like they were never up there to begin with already. And so this is my question. Was Hannibal, the man who made Rome tremble, black?
As with any other question about this, right? First, let's call the thing what it is. This obsession with trying to make sure that this great general Hannibal, the man who makes Rome tremble, is a white man, is of course the desire is strong. And we can go back to Dodge and sort of like the Caesar Alexander Hannibal, right? Because he classifies Hannibal as one of the sort of great generals. We have to claim him. But also I think going back to this tension that I already talked about with the issue of sub-Saharan, and what we mean by that sort of classification is this desire also to for people who lay claim to descents from in North Africa that are anti-black as part of the sort of history of the development of the continent of Africa and the sort of Arab invasion and modern imperialism. There's a strong tendency to want to make sure we separate that. So yes, okay, obviously we have the myth of Dido and the founding of Carthage from Phoenicia. We also have Phoenix, the sort of the initiator of the Phoenicians in North Africa, or even in Ethiopia, right? If we read Heliodorus's novel from the 3rd or 4th century CE, we don't know the exact date. He's got they tell the myth of Andromeda in that. And Andromeda, and of course we have 5th century vases of this. This is Phoenix, who's the father of Andromeda, who they're white, or they're represented as Phoenician, as not black, but they're in a space that is filled with black people. So, but the crux of the story of Heliodorus is that the king and queen of Ethiopia are black, and they have a daughter though who comes out to have really white skin. I mean, she's called white because she's a woman, but she has really pale skin, and so the mother has to hide the birth of this child because she's afraid that people will think that she had the child out of wedlock. But in fact, what happened is, and here you can get a little bit of insight into ancient medical theories. There is a medical theory called imprinting, where if in the act of sex you are staring at something, that image can imprint onto the fetus. It's something about how they understood how the eye worked, the nature of how the eye worked. And so in the story, this Black Ethiopian king and queen of Ethiopia are procreating, and she stares at a painting on the wall of Andromeda. And so the pale skin of Andromeda imprints on the child. And the whole thing ends up happy. Everybody's fine. Look, mom and dad, it's really me. But in the meantime, she's kidnapped by pirates and raised by shepherds. And there's true love. It's sort of like the Princess Bride of the ancient world. It's a really great story. But what it tells us, though, is how very common this sort of idea of these mixed identities are in North Africa. That we have these stories that have people who are Black and people who are not Black interacting all the time. And there's a reality that they could, in fact, be related, and it's not a big deal. This is the world that Hannibal exists in, right? This is the world of the Nubians and the Cushites, of the Ethiopians and the kingdom of Aksum, of West African Ethiopians who are obviously Black, of the Garamantes, who we don't know what they look like, of the people known as the Berbers, who also, again, this is not an actual ethnic category. It becomes one later because it can connect to the sort of linguistic categories, but it's actually up in the air what to be called a Berber actually means. And we have this sort of stew pot of Phoenicians who have settled in these places, but they've integrated and mixed with people who are already there. And as we can go back to our Herodotus, right? Black Africans are indigenous to North Africa. So we're going to have these mixed populations. Egyptians might have Black skin, might be Black Africans. And even if their skin tones are slightly different, we would still call them Black today. And so is Hannibal Black? Again, the question is really, can we make him white? Which is the one thing he's not. He could be lots of things. The one thing he isn't is white, because that's not a category that they would have recognized. And it isn't actually one that fits. But if you look at his bust, right, we have this bust that I'll share with Nick, again, that comes from Capua. It was found in Italy, this bust of Hannibal, because remember, of course, the Carthaginians controlled Spain, parts of Spain, they controlled parts of Italy, they controlled Sardinia and Sicily. If you go to Sicily, the history of Sicily is a sort of highly mixed African, Greek, indigenous, and Italian cultures. Even today, I think they're still not sure how Italian they are down there in Sicily, which I love about them. But this bust that they found in Italy of Hannibal, if you look at the bust, if we're going to say, oh, look at the physical features, he's not white. But what does that mean? Because none of them are white. Is he Phoenician? Is he Berber? Whatever that means. Is he African? He's African. That we can say that with certainty. He is African. What that means beyond that is anybody's guess, but he's not European. So that was one thing we can actually say for sure. My whole point is, look, it doesn't matter if he's Black. We will never know, but it doesn't matter because he could be, but I know what he isn't, and he isn't European, and he isn't German, and he's not Nordic, and he's not Aryan. He's not your people.
Join the Comgiverse Patreon for exclusive content, behind-the-scenes access, and special perks. Support the channel and connect with a community of revolutionary intellectuals and scholars. Click the link in the description to join now.